Good. So, welcome to the Insights of PowerShell User Group online meeting in June, right before PSConf EU in 2 weeks. Just be aware of our code of conduct. So it's simply saying, be kind in the chat and don't yell at each other. So be respectful to each other. Then, thank you to our sponsors, Synergy, who is doing the recording and giving us Gather, the world where you are right now, and also covering my costs with Meetup. So thank you again. So just a quick introduction of myself. I'm Constantin. I work with PowerShell for, I think, nearly 10 years now. I'm available on Blue Sky. With my handle and the user group handle. And if you want, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search my name, you will find me. If you have any questions or want to, for example, speak at my user group. So I have a sessionized profile where you can hand in a session, and I will check if it's fitting, and then I will contact you, and we can arrange something. Even if the date is not in the future dates, we can, and you don't have any time or so, then we can reschedule that. That's absolutely no problem. Good. Yeah, session will be recorded. Mute your microphone. Okay, that's fine. And I will monitor the chat so that Guy don't have to, because he is, I think, focused on his session. And if you have questions, go to the Q&A, or if you are on the stage, then you can speak without the Q&A stuff. Good. Stay tuned. We are in a really big network. I think we have 5 or 6 or 7 user groups now, I think, who are in the network. So me and I think the Hanover user group is also there, then the Belgian guys and so on. They are in the Meetup network, so you can check if you go to Meetup PowerShell World. You can check the other sessions of the PowerShell World user groups also. So I think last week there was a UK Meetup and so on. And today's speaker, I hope I pronounce his last name right. I think it's Guy Leech, I think, is our speaker. And we met, I think, last year at the PSConf Europe, or I saw you at least. Will you be there in 2 weeks also?
I won't. No, I took the decision not to submit, not to attend.
Okay, I tried to submit also 2 or 3 sessions. They got rejected, but I'm going as an attendee, so that's totally
sold
fine.
Out. It's going to be a good event, I think.
Yeah. So just to make some advertisement, even if the event is sold out, in 2 weeks there will be the PowerShell Conference Europe in Malmö, Sweden. Also, Gail Colas, who is who works at Synergy. He organizes the event with 3 or 4 people. So Barbara and Alexander Nikolic, and I think Dr. Tobias Weltner is also there again. And Rob is also on the Orga team and so on. So they will give us from Monday till Thursday PowerShell sessions, PowerShell fun. The Microsoft product team is also there, and we can ask many questions. I think we will have a good time in Sweden. So just some advertisement. Good. I think, Guy, you can take over the stage. And thank you very much for being here and speaking again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I hope people enjoy it. We shall find out. Right, let's just screen share.
I will end to share.
How's that?
Yes.
It's not death by PowerPoint.
No.
It's more to remind me what to show you folks, and as a takeaway afterwards. All right, so I'm just trying to rearrange my real estate. I try and use a Microsoft store app called Region to Share. because I've got a 5K monitor in front of me, although I do most of my coding on a 4K portrait. But that's let me down, so I've just had to make my 5K screen a 1920 by 1080. So let's crack on with this. Okay, so who am I? Well, I'm not going to read it all out, but I wrote my first code in 1980, so quite a few years ago, and I suspect some of you weren't born. Started my professional career in the late 80s writing Unix device drivers. Got into EUC, end user computing, sort of Citrix and that sort of stuff, 95, so 30 years ago now. I was doing a lot of consultancy, but also still doing quite a lot of development. So PowerShell specifically, I've been doing since 2014, so only 11 years. It's a lot older than that, but been scripting and coding for a long time. And my day job is mostly writing PowerShell for software vendors, giving a bit of training. Sometimes for me, you see troubleshooting as well. So I think troubleshooting and developer heads kind of go together. The accolade of being a Microsoft MVP 5 years, just coming up to renewal. So hopefully that'll be 6. So I tend to tweet a lot. Also on Blue Sky now as well, given yes, I won't say much about Twitter, but we're it's been
we all know the thing, yeah.
Yes, we all know the elephant in the room. So yeah, I try and put tips out there, links to scripts, and the last slide is linked to my GitHub repo, which has probably got around about 150 scripts that I use for EUC and other things. Plus all the scripts I do for ControlUp are actually also freely available on their website. There's a script library on there, and then most of those can be used outside of ControlUp. They're just literally normal PowerShell scripts with parameter blocks, so you can run them from there. Same for parallels, but you're probably not all into the EU side of things. And I'm available for hire, so either remote or in person. Various things there. Anyway, enough of that. So I've got a blank canvas in Visual Studio Code. I use Visual Studio as well, so I'm swapping between C#, Go for a back-end web server project I'm doing, and PowerShell. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I don't always use VS Code. I've had various problems with it over its life, and because I tend to code a lot in virtual machines and in customers' environments, I tend to use the old but still useful ISE. Particularly as I don't get the luxury of using PowerShell 7 greatly, because with my customers being software vendors, their customers are end customers. And you try telling an end customer, oh, you must upgrade everything to PowerShell 7, unless that's on their roadmap, they're not going to do it. So it wasn't that long ago I used to get shouted at if I'd produce a script that would need to run on PowerShell 3. Because there were still some customers with Windows 7 and PowerShell 2. But our minimum is now PowerShell 5.1. Although I do use a lot of PowerShell 7 for particularly for my troubleshooting and my own projects. Because I don't know if you're aware, you can actually ship the installers for PowerShell 7 legally in your own code if you want. Confirmed by Microsoft. So if you do need PowerShell 7 out there, you can actually put it as an installer as part of your product if you want.
Yeah, and you can also do a portable version of it, so you can download the zip file from here and.
Absolutely, and that's how I keep all the old versions on my laptop. I tend to download the zip from GitHub, unzip it to a version-specific folder. So if I need to try something out on a different version, a customer says I have a problem with this 7.4. whatever or 7.5, then I can very quickly just run the exe, because it is as you say, sort of self-contained / portable out of the box. Although I do have problems with 7.5, because I don't know if you use Outgrid View a lot. I do for troubleshooting and presenting of data, but that's broken in 7.5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So filtering and other things like that cause it to either stop working or just disappear.
Okay.
I'm,
So,
I'm
just a quick add to, I use, I think it's Jeff wrote this, so Jeffix. He's another great member of the community. He wrote a module, I think it's called PS Tools, I think, or so, or some where you can, if you download that, you can select a specific release of PowerShell, and it will be downloaded automatically to your machine, and you also can install it. So that is what I use at a customer where I need a specific PowerShell 7 version for some modules to work. So that's a good that's a good module for bringing PowerShell to Windows, for example, if it's not pre-installed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's funny. I got asked when I was interviewed by the script runner folks
Mhm.
at PSConf last year, what my favorite module is. And I tend not to use third-party modules, not because I want to write everything myself from scratch. I definitely don't want to do that. But again, as part of the problem with me producing scripts for customers who then have their own customers, if you say to them, you need this module installing, they'll go, first of all, what's the module?
Oh,
Install it,
yeah.
and how do I keep it up to date? Because a lot of them aren't PowerShell people because they
Mhm.
don't need to know PowerShell to run the scripts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and if I do scripts for Azure or AVD, then I tend to use REST through invoke REST method
Mhm.
rather than relying on the PowerShell modules, which can be a bit painful. It's faster, which is good, but it is a bit more painful.
Mhm.
But again, my own projects, yes, I use as many modules as I need. I don't have a version to them. It's just can't always guarantee they're there. Lowest common denominator, as we call it, which is why I use ISE often. But again, unless you've got ISE steroids or something like that, I don't even know if that has AI in it now. I was late to the game with AI, but I can't live without it now. It makes me much more efficient, particularly this week and last couple of weeks when I've been writing in Go, a language I've never used before. It's similar-ish in some ways to C, but it was my oldest son, who's actually a developer for a bank in the UK, who said, "Oh yes, use Go." So I thought, "Oh, yeah, what the hell? I'll give it a go." But flicking between PowerShell, Go, and C# on the same day, and flicking between VI, because I was using VI in the 1980s, so I know all the weird, keyboard commands and shortcuts. So I'm doing :WQs in VS Code and Control S's in it's interesting, probably my age, if nothing else, flicking between different development languages almost simultaneously. Anyway, so it's going to be a mixture of live coding, so much better than dead coding. Um, Although I hope I don't have to give up coding when I die, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So it's going to be a mixture of demo and slides. The slides, like I say, really to remind me what to talk about. And this is something I come across a lot. I'll look at somebody's code and they'll go, "Well, yeah, I'm going to tidy it up later. Yeah, I'm going to make it more robust later. I'm going to fill in the gaps later." Fill in the gaps, maybe, yeah, because if you want to prototype an idea, you might want to put a few lines of code down and see if it works, and then definitely come back and do the error handling, because that's a session I can do in its own right, and which is check for errors, and I will mention it later on in here. Yeah, so I see some great scripts, but then no error handling. So yeah, if you're let's say you're authenticating to Azure, well, if you don't authenticate because it fails, then what's the point in carrying on? And then you'll see somebody who doesn't know PowerShell going, "I see this whole screenfuls and screenfuls of red errors," where really there's just one error, but because you didn't get out, abort when you got a fatal error, then you're just making it harder for somebody to understand what's going on. So sometimes I'll put the error handling in later, but what I'll tend to do is I'll tend to leave lots of to-do comments in my code. So it's like, yeah, I know I need to cater for that, but I'll do that later. If you've got an edge case, something that's probably not going to happen, but it might do, then come back to it later. But particularly me in my old age, when I forget things, well, at least I think I do, I can't remember, then I'll put these to-do comments in, and then before I release anything, I'll search back through my code looking for to-do items, like, oh yes, I forgot to do that, or no, I've already done that. But certainly, I don't think I'll tidy this code up, I'll make it better. You might add code, but you're probably not going to change code you've already written. And why not just start as you mean to go on? Yeah. So that you don't have to change it. Yeah. Error handling, I'll come back to that. But every line of code that you write, think to yourself, how could this fail? Where could this go wrong? Could the input be, useless, rubbish, junk? Yeah. Particularly if users are involved in, so you think, oh, someone's going to enter a URL as HTTPS, but what if they don't? What if they put in some other format, or don't put the HTTPS, or just put HTTP and hope it redirects? You can deal with all that sort of stuff. I won't talk about regular expressions today, but I can do a separate session on those if you like, because regular expressions are something I love. Again, I've been doing them since the 1980s. That's the only way we can search in VI that I mentioned earlier. But they can be very powerful, but they don't have to be scary. So if you see me on social media, I do take offense when people say, oh, look, this is a cat crawling across a keyboard created a regular expression. No, don't make people think they're difficult. They don't have to be. They can be, but AI can help you there as well. Hard coding. So anyway, let's go and do some code, and I'll come back to that. So a new VS Code session, dark, of course. You can see I've already used Copilot. I couldn't remember how to go into presentation mode but not make it full screen when I thought I was going to be able to use this region to share tool. So we'll start a new PowerShell file. So what do I do when I start? Well, I've probably got an idea of something I'm going to do. Now, I was saying earlier before we started that I had to put a shout out on social media today. So give me some ideas of a script I could write on the fly. 0 responses back, nothing back from my 9,000 followers on Twitter. But I don't know if they follow me for my humor or for my humor. You make jokes, Guy. Or my PowerShell. So I'll just kind of make something up as I go along, which is the story of my career, really. So the first thing I'll do is I'll put in a comment block. Yeah. And again, I've got Copilot enabled. I would strongly suggest you use Copilot or some other integrated tool. I did try Cursor this week because a lot of people said, oh yeah, Cursor's a lot better. I was using it for my Go code, but what I found was that it didn't explain things to me. So I'd say, oh, this is wrong, this doesn't work, and it would produce new code, but not explain to me what was wrong and what it had changed. Whereas if I use Copilot, it'll say, yes, this is wrong and this is what you need to do, so that you can learn. So I think for pure vibe coding, it might be okay, but I want to learn as I go. Vibe coding, I don't know if people use, but I think it's just saving up generating a lot of technical debt that'll come back and hurt them later. So I'll start off with, again, it's predicting this for me, so I don't have to type stuff in. It's already given me an exact idea for a script, but that's one line, so that's not probably a great idea. So what I'll do is, no, I don't want to do that. I hit tab, which took the content, whereas I wanted to indent it. Grab some files and do something with them. Description, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to tab it so that it's there from the Copilot suggestion. Mainly because I'll come back and fill it in later. But this is key, having a synopsis at the top for me. Partly if I don't come back to it, I don't save it something with a sensible name. So that's one thing to do, of course, is to give it a meaningful name. And I'm in my typical PowerShell scripts folder here where I've got 1 or 2 scripts over the years, and that's not even for specific customers. So we'll say the demo for PSVD, mainly because I'm not going to be able to spell your user group, sorry, without reference.
No problem.
At least I'm honest, yeah. So this is already, I mean, this is not an AI demo, but this is already, suggesting things for me. I'll go with it. So I ignore that. The other thing I will start doing is .notes, because what I want to do, even if I end up putting this script in GitHub or some other region control. Now it's interesting there. It's also suggested a date in 2023, suggesting that perhaps it doesn't know where we
Don't
are.
know from which repo is this coming. I don't know.
Yeah. It knows my style already, though. Added error handling logging. So let's change that again. As I pointed out on your slide, you had US date format.
Yeah.
Along with the rest of the world. In fact, I was going to say other Europeans, because at least I'm a European, even if I'm not in the EU anymore. But I tend to use this date format now, so we don't have any ambiguity with your slide saying we were on the 6th of December, I think.
Yes, that's not the correct thing. Yeah.
I usually put my name or my Twitter handle, and I tend to put script born if I can type it correctly. And that's it for my comment block.
Just for using the right names, what is this block called specifically?
Yeah, I call it the comment help block.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has got any.
Yeah. That was just what I wanted to say. That's the comment-based help block.
So that you can do a get-help on
Yeah.
the file for this.
Yes.
So it's usually the last thing I produce, and I've got lots of scripts in my sort of awaiting to release folder because I didn't do this to start with, and I've got to go back in.
Yeah.
And because if you remember back to the slide we saw briefly, I say don't hard code anything. Any string or value, if I've got a sleep in or start-sleep in my code, then I'm not going to have a start-sleep 5. I'm going to have a start-sleep minus seconds 5. Yeah, again, when we script, we always use full commandlet names, full parameter names. But what I'll also do there is I won't have 5 in there. Yeah, I'll have, depending on what it's asleep for, I might have a parameter. So let's do that. I'll come back to commandlet binding in a moment.
Yeah, and just for the recording or just for the information, you can put in the comment-based help a bit more. So you can, for example, provide examples.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
To
So that with an example, if I can spell it correctly.
Yeah, and you can, for example, provide what does the script or the commandlet inputs and what does it outputs, so the data type or so. So that's also part of the part of the comment-based help.
Yeah, so that once I've done that, if I get the full path, shift right click, because nobody likes right clicking without shift on Windows 11, do they? And if I do a get help, which of course that you can actually say help if you want. On a show window, and you give the full path the script. Then somewhere,
Yeah.
So I think
it's a typical help that you will get out of any commandlet on that has support for this. Yeah.
Well, you'll get one regardless. Whether you've put in the comments or not, but it's always a good idea, particularly as you say with the examples, to have in because with my scripts, like I say, I don't hard code stuff. So if I had a sleep in here, then I would have something like sleep time. But and this is also in the slides. Also have the unit in there. Yeah. Also make sure you type the square bracket. Yeah.
And you delete it there, yeah? Perfect.
and have a default value, yeah? So this is why if you look at some of my scripts, they might have 30 plus parameters, and somebody would look at it or look at the help and go, I'm not sure I'm going to get all these. Yeah, what parameters do I need? But the point is, you only actually need to specify the mandatory ones. Yeah, this does not say mandatory. Yeah, you could put mandatory equals false, but I think that just makes it more difficult to read. Yeah. So I tend not to put mandatory false so that the mandatory parameters, the ones you must specify, stick out more in the comment block. So if I now have later on, I have a start dash sleep. You see again with AI Copilot here, it's already figured out what I want. Yeah, and this isn't groundbreaking, but this saves time. This is what I like about Copilot. It just, I can just hit tab on that twice. And it's already, now that I've told it, grab some files, it's turning into an AI demo, isn't it? Rather than how Guy writes his scripts. But I thought if I used PowerShell ISE, you'd laugh at me. So I ought to embrace the modern tools you young people are using. And
Yeah, so Andy just mentioned a thing that I saw last week also. If you have a script written out correctly, and you ask Copilot with the /doc short code to write you some documentation, the Copilot will produce you the whole code-based help block. So that's a game changer. Yeah,
absolutely, it saves a lot of time. In what I used to do was to copy and paste the param block,
yeah.
and then I've got a fiendish regular expression that lets me turn all the parameters into dot parameter. But another reason to use AI. It's going to replace us, I hope. I don't think it will, but it's going to make us more efficient. I don't need to sleep. I tend not to put sleeps in my code if I can help it. But so we're going to go back to the commandlet binding as well. So I always put that in. What does that do? That gives us support for minus verbose, minus what if, all those sorts of things. Then the what if, that will something we will cover later on, because if you want to do it for your own instructions rather than built-in commandlets, then you have to code it. But it's always a good idea to do that if you're writing a script for somebody who, or for the community, let's say, or for a customer, which is non-passive, so it's going to make changes. Always prompt before it makes the change. And you say, well, what if I'm going to run it through this automation stuff? Well, again, if you use commandlet binding, you can specify an argument like minus confirm : $false, and it won't prompt. But you can use minus what if, and it won't prompt, but it tell you what it would have done. So you get a lot of extra value for nothing other than for putting in the commandlet binding. Sometimes you have to put extra things in here like should process, which I can never remember. So it's useful that AI puts it in. So I had to go and look in my old scripts because I don't use it that often.
What should process? I think it's it's confirm, I think, and I think it's confirm. And then also you can put I don't know what if. I don't know exactly. I also have to look it up. Yeah.
I remember this much. It's this commandlet dot should process.
Yeah.
And now I can never remember which way around it is, whether it's target and action. And I think it's target and action. But again, it doesn't matter. So definitely why you should always use commandlet binding, particularly as my scripts tend to be quite quiet. I see a lot of scripts where people have a write host, I'm doing this, write host, I'm now doing this, write host, I'm now doing this. My scripts tend to be quiet. I'll have those as write verbose statements, so that when I'm testing, I can run it with minus verbose, or I can set the verbose preference. You can see I've already typed in here 2, which is continue. But then when I want to run it in production, or I don't want it noisy, then I don't specify minus verbose. So very, very few of my scripts use write host. And there is a comment in the slides we'll see later. It says, certainly don't use write host for error messages. Yeah, that's why we
Yes.
have write error and write warning.
And Andy just wrote, and they call write host their logging.
Yeah, logging I mention later, but I mean, I tend to use start transcript for for that, and then have a log file parameter. Again, it's optional. So if that log file, so again, this is typically what I would do in most scripts, particularly as I might want to capture a log file if it's running in a customer and having a problem. And then down here, well, you can there are two different ways of doing this. Use the keyboard to delete this, but it's working very well. Right. Okay. So there are two ways. I don't know if you're familiar with the $PS bound parameters. So you can say, has this parameter been passed? And you can see it's already starting the code for me there. So I just hit tab and I can take it. And in fact, I don't even need the else there. Go away. I don't. Yeah, that's the only trouble with the prediction. Sometimes it is a pain, and you get too much. Particularly if I find I tend, and we've already seen it in this demo, that I tab complete, or I might want to tab indent something, but instead it takes the completion from Copilot and got wrong. Didn't want that code. So this says if log file has been passed as a parameter. Now I tend not to use that. I tend to use this. Yeah. Why do I do that? Because if you have, again, I'll come back to that later. Go away. I don't want your errors. What some customers might do is rather than having to pass parameters, they might set a default like I did for the sleep time seconds. Yeah. And if that's the case, then PS bound parameters would return false because you haven't explicitly passed minus log file when you're calling the script. Whereas if log file is not null or empty, then you can start your transcript. Yeah. And again, I tend to make things like append a parameter as well. We don't need to set a default for false because if for a switch, it's false by default. So I could do that. Of course, what I also probably want is a stop transcript somewhere. Now, we'll kind of automatically stop anyway. So later on, you might want to say, there's my to-do, but keyboard's faulty. And then down here, I'd have a stop transcript. But if I haven't started a transcript and I hit stop transcript, then it's going to go, oh, the host wasn't transcripting and give you an error. So I want to make a note. So I could repeat this. I could say, well, if it's not, so I could take the same code, is null or empty around log file, then stop transcript. What I tend to do is, lost a bracket there. No, I didn't lose a bracket.
No, it's in line 22. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a post on social media the other day saying, does color coding help you code? And quite a lot of people saying no. And it's like, what? Color coding definitely helps. Do with matching braces and trying to find things.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm colorblind, but I'm not, fortunately. So what I'll do now is I'll have a ball. Oh, not quite so many. Errors on a boo. Oh, that's a ghost. You could call it is transcripting, or is transcript started. Notice it says it's not used. And then what I'll do down here is I'll say, now it's suggesting that. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use this. Have we come across this before? Because quite often when I do this in workshops, a lot of people go, "Ooh, what's that?"
Yeah, it has to do. So I'm aware of this. So we have a dollar last exit code variable that is there
Well,
for
yeah, last exit code is when you're generally calling an executable.
right.
So
And
if I
this dollar question mark is, I think, the last the last return code of a commandlet. I think.
stated, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
true or false because
Yeah.
um, a commandlet will generally return true or false. True if
Right.
it's worked,
Yeah.
false it hasn't.
Yeah.
So if I do, whereas last exit code is generally for executable, so iCackle's in an executable. So if I say, let's hope I haven't got that file in here, but you never know on my machine, and we have a look at last exit code, you see iCackle's itself exited with an error 2,
Correct. Yeah.
file not found, I think, or folder not found 2 and 3 being those. I can't remember which way around they are. Whereas if it had worked, it would be 0. Yeah,
Mhm.
but 0 is false. Yeah.
Mm.
This is where it all gets a bit confusing thanks to Windows APIs and a little bit of inconsistency, because some Windows APIs return an integer where 0 is actually success and anything non-zero is an error, and that's the error code. But some functions return true and false, true or false, where false is 0 and true is not false. Yep. So it doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily 1, but it's not 0. That's all you can say. Most of the time it is 1, but don't guarantee it. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's clear screen. So if I do, I'm going to switch into Unix mode, which is dir. Yeah. But that saved me 1 character. You wouldn't believe how much more efficient I am every day because I use ls instead of dir because that 1 character saved. So let's again see if doesn't exist. Yeah. So it's got an error. Dollar question mark is false. Yeah. So that's the status of the last command. Whereas if I and it's going to actually I'll just pipe it through measure for. I'm going to pipe it through out null, I suppose, or assign it to null. Doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Okay, so for example, if start transcript fails, then you're having the is transcript started is false because the start transcript failed.
Absolutely.
And then you can so then the variable is correctly set, even if it's failed. Okay.
Rather than
Perfect.
hard coding it to true.
Okay, cool. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's probably me using VS Code. I'm not great with it with Copilot. It's a bit of a pain, but it's worth it. You might see me fumble, but we could always blame my age after all.
So just a tip: if you don't want the gray text, just hit escape, and then then it will went away.
Yes.
Yeah.
It tends to be when I tend to get it's nerves. Let's call it nerves. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very nervous. But something else I will tend to do is this.
Mhm.
Again, I asked, how do I make Copilot follow my formatting? Because I'm a brace on a new line kind of guy. Now, let's not get into a debate about that. I started life coding in the 80s on a green screen, and I did do braces on the same line because I only had 25 lines at a time, whereas coding on a 4K portrait screen, I've got 200 lines now, so I tend to put things separately because I think it works better. But if I can remember the key sequence, someone tell me what the key sequence is for formatting. It's something.
It's Alt Shift F, is it?
Alt Shift. I knew it's something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so apparently Copilot is now going to learn that I do things that way. Yeah. So I'll tend to have the bulk, my main code here. And then my exception block will generally be literally this without the E. Yeah. So I'll rethrow an exception. But the reason for that is that I can have a finally block. Yeah. Which it puts it anyway. That's not even Copilot. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the snippet. You have to get rid of the try. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm new to this PowerShell thing. Oh, extra brace. But at least it's telling you, yeah, before you run the code. So the finally means whatever path I take through this code will always do this bit. Yeah. So the stock transcript's not particularly important. Yeah. But what is important is, some of my scripts might download an Office ISO, which is, however many gigs. And I don't want to leave that file, lying around in a temporary folder. So what I would tend to have is I would have, downloaded. No, it's not a type, but I notice again, I strongly type things. Again, you don't need to in PowerShell, but this probably comes from my C and C++ background, where you generally do need to strongly type things, but it will help you, find syntactic, semantic errors, where something is the wrong type or not the type you expected it. So I do tend to strongly type, and it makes it more obvious what you're expecting. Because if you get something, if you're trying to put a string which is Guy is old and put that into an integer, then it will give you an error. Whereas if you hadn't declared that variable as an integer, it would automatically make it a string. Yeah. So strong typing is recommended by me. These are Guy's best practices, by the way. Feel free to discuss them at PSConf or other user groups or in the community, because different people have different ways they do stuff. But like I say, I've been coding since 1980, so I think I know what I'm doing, but maybe not. I'm always learning new things, since I've learned a few things in here already. So what we'll do is we'll have downloaded file. So when I declare anything, I always give it a default value. I find it's not been downloaded. So in my finally, what I would do is, if I want to download it, in fact, no, we'll do it this way around by equal, not equal. Sorry, it must be painful watching me do this. It's painful for me. So download file, it's not null. Then what I can do is, you can tell I don't code in this every day, can't you? And then I might do a remove item minus path. Now notice I haven't done a test path on it. So what it's suggesting there, to do an error action silently continue. Now you might say, oh, why don't you do a minus recurse as well? Well, again, if I'm not expecting it to be a folder, then I don't want to start recursing in case it is a folder. And I've got something wrong, and that folder just happened to be Windows System 32 or something. Yeah. So, like I said, in the PowerPoint we saw briefly. Oh, why did you do that? Oh, because I didn't hit escape to take it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Don't talk and type. Yeah.
Could you just explain what error action does in PowerShell?
Absolutely. So let's go back down here. Let's make this directory a bit shorter, or folder. So we went back to, we go back here, for instance. Whereas if I do error action silently continue, I don't get any redness, because one of my striving design goals is to reduce the amount of redness revealed to people using the scripts. They're not necessarily going to be end user, somebody in accounts, although it could be. It's probably going to be another IT person, but particularly if they're not PowerShell trained or PowerShell aware, then they see any red and it's they'll start panicking. And they won't even read the error message, because that's something else I say. If you do output an error message, then output a meaningful error message where you can. Notice $? Is still telling us it failed, and we should have error 0 because error is an array, so that's built in. Yeah, so that gives us the error. We can actually see how many errors we've had. 4. That's not bad for me, but I've not been writing in here very long. Good idea in a script as well is actually to do that when you start, so that you know all errors within the script are from your script. Yeah, because if you start looking at the $error array and somebody has called your script from within an existing PowerShell session or PowerShell process, then you could be getting errors you may effectively inherited, not quite inheritance, but getting errors passed to you, and they might confuse you if you're looking at error 0. So now if we look at error 0, yeah, because my error count is 0. What I will tend to do though is if I am expecting an error and I don't want to show it, what I'll do is actually have error variable and error from get file and give it a meaningful name. Yeah. Notice there's no $ in front of it, yeah, because this is a variable name. Now, if you type a command in immediate mode, but you don't quite want to execute it yet, I don't want to execute this yet. I'm going to hit home. I'm going to hit hash to make it a comment. Now I enter. So that's now my history, and I can go back to it. Yeah, rather than having to control C it or something like that. Because what I want to do is I want to show you that this particular variable doesn't exist. But this actually brings me on to something else, which I recommend, which is when you're in a development mode, then you run in what's called strict mode. Have any of you seen this before? One of the few
The strict mode, you say?
Yes.
I wrote about it in the help. So that's the thing where you have to strongly type everything.
I'm not say strongly typed, but let me. And again, the best way to do it is latest. It's one of the few PowerShell commandlets that doesn't have a get equivalent. There is no get strict mode. And notice what happens now. This will help you a lot when you're writing a script. Yeah. Which is, if you've typoed, spelt a variable name wrong or something like that, rather than so your code isn't using the variable you've already set, it's using something that doesn't exist. You see, when we're not running in strict mode, it just returns null, which your script might deal with in a different way. Whereas with strict mode enabled, so strict mode minus version latest, if a variable doesn't exist, then it will give you an error. Yep. So I find when I'm developing code, so you'll find this in my PowerShell profiles, both for ISE and for standard PowerShell, that I have that. I will not put that in the script. Yeah. So I don't have that in the script, but I will always have that in when I'm testing, because that will help you find a lot more errors or mistakes in your logic. Typos of variable names is the main one. But it does mean you do a bit more effort. Yeah. So, for instance, hopefully you know about PS version table.
Mm-hmm.
So we know PS version table dot PS version. But if I type in PS, I get an error. Whereas if I do, you know about Control R to search as well. I hope set and strict mode minus off. Which is what we call a double-edged sword. There's advantages and disadvantages. Because the advantage in your code in strict mode off is you don't have to test whether that property exists before you access it. Whereas with strict mode on, what I'd tend to do in my code, if I could type, is if PS version dot PS object every variable, whether it's built in or your own variable, has a PS object. It's how you get at the properties. In fact, let's get rid of the if to start with, and let's get brackets right. So you'll see for what's it? Yeah, PS version. Should spell it correctly. Why is it when I want to type out something I can't? Version table. Yep. But you see, if that had been with strict mode off, that would have just returned something empty, which wouldn't have let me know that I was using something that hadn't been defined. Yeah, tab complete. Yeah. Because it's not a, it's a hash tail of, yeah, it's not a custom object. So but same applies. That the dot. So what you would have to do is you'd access it through the square bracket accessor. Whereas if we typo something, so would say if, then you can you can actually access it through that square bracket anyway, as you've just done, or it's safe to do that. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. With strict mode, you have to do this extra bit in your code if you're going to access a property that may or may not exist. If you know the property is going to exist, then something is severely broken. If it doesn't, then you might not bother coding defensively. This is what we call defensive coding, as in, my dogs are barking. I hope you can't pick that up on the microphone.
That's fine.
Well, there's only 4 of them downstairs. Somebody hopefully looking after them. But so this is what I have to do when I'm with strict mode. Yeah. So the downside of set strict mode is my code might be a little bit longer because I'm doing these tests. But what I could do in my code is I could then do a else write warning. Forget the fact I can't type. I haven't got time to go back to that. Yeah. So if a property is missing, then so we would say, let's say for some reason type it. Yeah, then I'd get the warning. So some of my code is very defensive like that. But if you're getting results back from, let's say we get equals ls, so I'm just getting or get child item. So $f. Remember, we can explore variables. So that's an array of 20 items, which is the directory listing of the root folder. Yeah. But if I know that something is always going to have a particular property, then I probably wouldn't test it. Yeah. I know it's going to have full name. Yeah. I wouldn't do a if PS object. So I wouldn't do if 0 PS object full name. Yeah. Because I know full name's going to exist. Yeah. Because of what get child item returns. If it doesn't return a full name property, then there was something seriously broken. Yeah. So it does mean using sets transcript does mean a little bit extra coding, but I would suggest to you that it is worth it to help you pick up errors that you might not otherwise catch.
So Andy has an interesting opinion about error things. He said I would argue not using error in scripts, but using error variable in expected situation with errors. So I think he meant something like if you just
a bit like I was going to do in that demo.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I
used
went
to.
to that line, and this is why I went off on a tangent. Yep, I went off topic because I'm very good at that. It was just to show before we did that this doesn't exist.
But this has the error inside. Yeah. Because because if you do a error.clear and especially if you're in a console like you mentioned before, if someone wants to have the errors from before, then they are cleared out. So you mess with the user's in environment.
You change the environment. Yeah, that's one
Yeah,
thing should a scripters try and avoid.
yeah,
You know,
and that
if it's a scheduled task that runs PowerShell.exe minus file, then don't necessarily worry about it.
yeah,
That's a temporary environment. Although if you're changing registry values or things like that, then it's should you set it back? And most of the scripts I write for my customers, like like Control Up Software Vendor, if I change anything in the environment, then I will change it back, which again is why you have a finally block, so that you can do any putting stuff back, deleting of files, anything that needs setting back. So somebody should be able to not know that your script has run if it's passive. If it's meant to change something, then you'd expect it to change something, but that's the only thing it should change. What I tend to do with the error variable, which I'll finally get back onto, is even though it doesn't exist because you're specifying a name there, I will tend to set it to null anyway to start with. Notice I haven't strongly typed it because I'm not quite sure what type it is. I could figure it out, but I don't strongly type everything. So now I go back. I'm not very good with this keyboard thing, am I? So I go back to that now. Now that's in my error variable. Yeah, but I can also then specify. Well, in fact, before we do that, let's set it to null again. Home key. No, there's cursoring around. So $question mark is still valid. Yep. So we know there's an error. And we can say $null equals dollar error, whatever it was called. So I could wrap that in an if. So I can say what I would tend to do is if not $question mark or that, then I've got some error processing to do. Yeah. But it might be, let's say this is a folder that it needs, that it's expecting to be there. But if it's not there, it's not a, it's not the end of the world. Hopefully, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's not a catastrophic failure. We could make the folder, and perhaps if it needed some files, we could get those files from somewhere else, download them, or create them. Yeah. So that's a case of, okay, I'm going to do some error handling. So rather than say, oh, here's some red stuff to worry you, Mr. Script user, what I'm actually going to do is say, oh, yeah, okay. So I'm going to do a new item minus path, whatever it is. Yeah. But then the new item might fail. So you'd need to do, you'd need either you could say, now, if you remember, new item actually returns, it does an automatic minus pass through. So I would then do it if not new item, whatever. And I would then probably then have an item type and directory, I can never remember. So if that fails, then I put an error out. And if that might be a fatal error at that point, in which case I would then throw an exception. I'm not getting into error handling at this point. So that's a good way of hiding your error, but still being able to examine it. Yeah. As, I think you said somebody said in the chat. So that was what I was coming back to, but forgot. So thank you for that. I think it's time for some PowerPoint now, mainly to remind me what to talk about. Yeah. So they don't hard code anything. So hopefully we've seen all these already. Not that I've actually written anything that actually does anything yet, but I will do before we finish. I promise. Might not be actually a useful script, but it's more a case of how I approach it. That's what I was hoping this session was going to get across to people. So I tend to make things parameters, as we saw with, here I've got sleep times, log files. Some of the scripts I wrote to work in Citrix environments, I think one had over 40 parameters, because every time I go and look at a commandlet, it might be in it. I've got as a okay. Let's say I've got. So again, hopefully you know about control space. Yeah, so rather than having to tab through, I can actually show all of the parameters in one go, and I can actually use the cursor keys to move through them. And notice it puts the type at the bottom. But if I was using get AZ storage account in my script, and for instance, I see it says, oh, it includes that option, which I might or might not need, I would probably make that I might make that a parameter in my script and then pass it through. Yeah. Again, this is a hypothetical argument of situation. I've no idea what that does, because it's not something I use a great deal in my scripts, is to get AZ storage account. But it might be a case of, I may or may not need to include that. So rather than hard coding it in my script, I would have it as a parameter. Yeah. So there's two ways you can do that when it's a switch. So we can see here it's a switch. So I can have a switch, call it the same thing. I'll call it geo stuff. Save me having to type something or copy and paste.
You have to type switch.
Yeah, switch correctly. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, no, I suppose it could be a custom type, couldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're ever going to run this, so don't worry too much. But well spotted. It's good that somebody's paying attention. It was a deliberate mistake, obviously, just to see if anybody was following. I'm getting a bit dry. I need a drink of water. It is just water. It's not vodka, honestly. So there's two ways we can do this. So if I was in here, so the main code. So if I was doing a get, then what I could do is, again, I can use the control space. I can do this geo stuff. That's one way of doing it for a switch. But if it was a string parameter that was optional, for instance, the one I typically use a lot in my code is, so let's get some files. That's what this script was going to be. So I'm going to say array, and notice Copilot is already helping me here. Now, one thing I will do, I don't know if you've come across array flattening in PowerShell, which is meant to be a useful feature, but for me, sometimes it's a pain in the posterior, as we say. As in, if PowerShell returns one item and you're expecting an array, sometimes PowerShell will turn it out of an array into a single item of that type. So get child item, if it returned one item, might not return an array. So I will always wrap it an array. First of all, I'll say it's an array, but that doesn't guarantee it is actually going to be an array. And then I'll wrap it in this at parentheses and close it to force it to be an array, even if it's one item. Because I've been bitten once too many times, as we say, by flattening of arrays in PowerShell. So it might be that I want to pass a filter string here. So again, rather than hard coding, it might be, actually, this is going to work with, faux filter. Yeah, going. Must be a keyboard fault. It couldn't possibly be me. Equals, I blame Brexit, I think. So we're going to look for TXT files, yeah? So rather than hard coding it to, say, minus filter star.txt, that's what I mean by hard coding. You'll rarely see any string literals like that in my code. First of all, because I want to make it, the script is extensible and is usable in many different states as I can. So I make it there. Did you hear it in?
Yeah.
Yep. So I can say, oh yes, please go and download this module from this
Yeah.
URL, like I said earlier. We've seen the tidy up.
Yeah.
So in your finally block, anything that you've created or changed that shouldn't be left that way, remove it. Particularly if you're creating or downloading large files, and if you're not reusing the same file name. So often I will use temporary file names, or I might use new GUID to produce a temporary name. Then if you run that script 10 times to download a 4 gig ISO, you might accidentally leave 40 gig of data around, which is not always a good thing. And we've seen logging. There's also PowerShell transcription. And if you're familiar with that, I did put a tweet out about this earlier, but you might have proper work to do. We all know about favorites. Need to run it elevated because it's an HQ local machine. So I need to go to my admin because I don't log on as an admin user because I'm sensible. So you can see here I've got bookmarks, so I can go straight to transcription. So at the moment, the transcription is actually disabled because I've renamed that key. If I change that back, then I'll get date folders and output directory. So this is very good for debugging PowerShell that's embedded in products.
Yeah.
So that you'll get a date folder in there and then randomly named log files. So you can set that by GPO. A lot of people tend to do that now in the security space, so they can see what PowerShell was run, which is great as long as you've got something to archive or delete old transcript folders, because depending on how much PowerShell is run, it may fill up your output folder, or sorry, output drive, wherever that is. So
I had a customer. They don't have it enabled after this. They had a machine where a script starts up every second and checks if a task is there, and then if you have transcription enabled and you have it stored on the C drive specifically, then the machine is going to get crashed or going to get kernel stressed because we don't have anything to store on C.
Schedule task to run PowerShell to delete everything over so many days old. Again, is one line.
Just be aware of this. Yeah.
Absolutely, but there is a bug, and I put another tweet about this today because one of my customers was saying, "Oh, your script's not producing any out, or producing some output, but not all of it. There's some missing." There's been a long-standing bug in Windows PowerShell, so PowerShell 5.1. Whereas if you've got those transcription values enabled in the registry, which is usually through GPO, then output will disappear.
Oh,
sometimes,
nice.
not always. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. So you have to be careful with transcription, but you've also seen how I use start transcript. That's particularly important or useful. If you are running scripts as part of an automation workflow or flow, or through task scheduler, where you're not going to see a window with the output, so you can produce a script if you want to, either through a parameter, or what I do, one of my customers now, is I make my script at the start, so somewhere right at the start. So rather than having log file here, is I'll store log file effectively in a registry value. Yeah. So I'll go and look for that registry value in a key. If that value exists in the key, then I will start transcription. Yeah. If it doesn't exist or it's empty, then I won't start transcription. I don't have to change the parameters to the script, so I can turn debug mode on, if you like, externally to the script. And that has been very useful for me. So that's part of a standard function that I include in all my scripts for that particular customer now. So effectively, you can set debug mode outside of your script, and as long as your script reads that registry value, I'd suggest you use a function, either shared in a module, or worst case, if you're not using modules, copy and pasted between every script. But at least it's a function. If you need to change it, you know where to change it. Or you can .source. So poor man's modules. .source.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
We can just, what dot source means is literally dot, and then the name of the file, which is
Yeah.
normally where we have functions in. So rather than having to do a full-blown module with PSD1 and PSM1 files, you can dot source a PS1 file. So if I can think of one off the top of my head, I will pull one out of the hat, proverbial hat. There's one I wrote many years ago. So that actually, if we look at it, yes, come on, I did. Oh, Control O doesn't work in. Oh, yes, because I've got quotes around it. Another thing to do in your code, by the way, is if you take paths, I always make mine strip out quotes at the start and the end. So if somebody has taken a quoted path, let's say from exploring, shift right click, then it will actually ignore those quotes. So this actually defines a function. So there's no, so I've dot sourced it. So now what I can do is I can do, get MSI. You're going to see, that takes parameters. So that's dot sourcing. So that's a poor man's module.
Yeah.
So some of my customers, rather than having to pollute their environments with modules, I'll say, to run this, you need to download 2 scripts. You need to download the actual script that does the work, and then the helper script or the module script. So that's what we mean by dot sourcing.
Yeah, but for this you have to, if you close and reopen it, it is lost. So you have to
Absolutely
do it in a profile or create a script which dot source at this.
What I tend to do in my scripts is to dot source them, and by default I'll dot source them from the same folder, because what I don't want to, remember what I said about hard coding, I wouldn't want to hard code that path, because if a customer takes my script, he's probably not going to have a Guy's scripts folder. So you can use various built-in variables to find out where your script is executing from. And say, okay, well, I'm going to get MSI properties from the same folder that my script is executing from, rather than having to hard code. So again, like I said right at the start, hard coding is the devil's work. Most of these I've already covered the positive of. Yeah. What I see a lot of, I see a lot of this in scripts. So rather than people using param blocks, they have at the start of the script a whole load of variables. Company name equals, username equals, email server equals. Just put it in a param block with defaults. Makes it much easier to change. And because what you don't want to do is people who particularly are not very good at PowerShell coming into your scripts and changing things, and you hope they don't change something important. We use write verbose for those sorts of things, or we use breakpoints. And the actual line number executing is available as well, so you can actually have the same. I'm on line this, I'm on line this, which can be useful. If you've got a transcript log. So some of my example scripts on GitHub have that functionality in. This is a big one. This is somebody in the EUC community has scripts which are very useful, but they're 10,000 plus lines each. Why? Because he didn't know about functions. So when he was doing something new, but albeit very similar to what he did previously, it was copy and paste that chunk of code, change a few things, and that's it. And it works, but maintenance is an absolute nightmare. Because you've got to go back and change lots of codes. So first time you come to copy and paste, think, I'm going to use it again, but over here, make a function. So rather than copy, you cut the code, put it into a function, and then you call that function every time from every place that you need it. Maybe putting into a module or a poor man's module and dot source it. But that way, if you have to change that code, you change it in one place. Not everywhere. It's like, how many places did I paste this in? It's very difficult for maintenance. Write error is very good for outputting error messages. Okay, it might scare people because it's red by default, but it does make it much easier. And I don't know if you're aware, but there are different error channels and this is something that PowerShell borrowed from Unix. So there are different numbers. So if I want to say, if I'm going to get some debug, so something like AZVM. So all the Azure ones, if you use any of these, I think it's doing a background load of the module in here now. All the Azure modules tend to output the rest that they're using behind the scenes with -debug. So it produces a lot more output. Yeah, see what I mean? Even, I could say $F or $VMs equals, and $VMs is now just my output. Yeah, because that's just standard output, what's called stood out, STDOUT. Whereas debug goes to channel 4. Anybody know that off the top of the head? I'm guessing. Yeah, I can't remember if it is 4.
Mhm.
It's not 4. Is it 3 or is it 5? It's one of these. There is a no. It'll be the last one, won't it? That's called Sod's Law. You probably have that in German as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I've now got a file, debug.txt, which has just the debug in. Yeah. So it
Mhm.
makes it much easier for me to read that. Yeah. So this is why I use different. I use write warning when it is just a warning. I use write error. I might even use write debug, but really detailed debugging. That's what
I normally use the output stream, the verbose stream. That's normal. Debug I usually don't use. There is the information stream
well, yeah,
also.
debug can be a pain because
Yeah.
it will actually prompt you, do you want to continue? So it
Yes.
can be
Yes.
useful for single stepping, but it can
Yeah.
also slow things down. Now,
Yeah.
before PowerShell 5.1, write host couldn't be redirected either.
Yeah.
I think write host is 6 now. And again, another way to ignore errors, rather than if it doesn't take a minus error variable, is to do 2 greater than. So if I do, we'll go back to this one. An admin one doesn't necessarily need to be admin, but it's the first one that came up when I needed it. Don't know why it's so narrow, but hey, that's life. So if I do an iCapitals spread, no, let's do a.
You have, I think, caps lock enabled, I think.
No, I'm shouting.
Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't used the minus error action there. So this is a better way. This is a way to hide.
Mhm.
But this is also why sometimes people can get confused when they call, particularly they call an external exe, and they wonder why it's not capturing the error because they go to different channels. So if I go to .txt, then I actually have a file with that in because they go. So if you say, so people say, well, when I do this, why is F empty?
Mhm.
Whereas if I do this,
Mhm.
where
Oh,
this is
nice.
this is
Mhm.
stolen from Unix,
Mhm.
where one is standard output and ampersand mean is referring to that channel, which is
Mhm.
exactly how we do it in Unix shell. So I was doing back in the 1980s. And 2 is standard error. So 0 is actually standard input, 1 is standard output, and 2 is standard error. And then I forget what the others are, but I've just remembered that.
Well,
Yeah,
good that we have some Linux guys in into the development team. So yeah,
yeah,
that they know what they're
uh,
doing.
yeah. What not to do? If it's a fatal error, you can't continue. Get out of there, yeah. Rather than just going, oh, there's an error, and then hitting another error, another error. I've had this with lots of customers. I've got, someone's produced this script for me. I've got 2 screenfuls of errors. I don't understand. You just go and look. We as PowerShell people know you look at the first error.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But exit. Yeah, throw another arrow or just exit. Already covered that one. Again, I knew well when I wrote the slides for this. I thought, oh, I'm never going to get through 2 hours worth of stuff. But strangely, I have. I've got a hard stop, and I know it's an hour later for you guys as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, I will make the slides available. I'm happy to come back at a later date and finish this off or do anything else.
Yeah.
So I assume we've lost a few people, but
yeah, we had some difficulties with Gather also. So 2 people
don't get me started on Gather. I hate that platform, but
are going out. The recording was stuck for 1 minute or so, but yeah, let's see what we get out.
it'll be what it'll be, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that we had. Yeah, so I hope that we will sort it out next time. But definitely, if you can send me the GitHub link or the link where everything is available that you showed us today, I can tweet that out. That the people who are interested in can check what you had. And yeah, I will make that available to our meetup. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ping me
Mhm.
on social media or Meetup has messaging, I think. And
Yes. Yeah.
let's not go on this Gather thing.
So, does anyone has any questions for Guy right now that he wants to ask, or she wants to ask?
Yeah, I have a question. I like your paraphrase for a poor man's module as dot sourcing. What do you think about private modules? I've sometimes used built a module, but didn't put it in the global module path, but I deployed it with my script and imported this. I call it a private module via import module scope. Okay.
Scope, yeah, you have scope all users or scope current user, I think. Research.
No,
I think what
no, not a module. I hadn't put it in the system module path, and also not in the private module path. I put it in the path where the script is stored, and I imported the module via import dash module $ps script root / module name.
Yeah.
The advantage, in my opinion, is you don't have problems if in the .sourced script file you have variables which can concur with the variables in the current script. And have you tried this approach?
I've done that on occasions, and when I was saying in your code, if you don't find the module that you need, why don't you download it? Well, that's a perfect use case for that. So that rather than installing a mod, particularly if you're running as administrator, because unless you're running as an administrator, you can't install modules globally. You can only install it for yourself. But let's assume you are running an administrator. Do you want to take the risk of giving a module that might have bugs or security issues to everybody who uses that machine? So that's a great reason for using, as you say, private module paths or scope of not the whole machine. But the flip side, I think, of that is testing. Yeah. So when you test that script, if you're going to give that to somebody else, so a good way to test a script is to test it on a machine that has never had anything on before, in a user profile that's never been logged onto before, or you delete the previous user profile and see if it works there. So you don't have the old problem of, well, it works on my machine.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
But you're right, to isolate it reduces the chance of problems and reduces the the security implications of it as well. So yes, good idea, but make sure you test it properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you also can do, Frank, is what I see other solutions do is if you start your script before calling the module, just extend your PS module path with your current path that you are on, and then you can do import module without your PS script root path. So that's
right.
That could also be a thing because, for example, Sampler does that in the structure because they are doing an output path where your release is there, and they are also including this one into the PS module path. So that's one other thing that you can do.
You're also doing it. Sorry, go on.
This approach I have done a few days ago the first time, extending the module path for one call. So it's an interesting idea. I will try it out.
And I think it's also temporary only for this session. So if you don't extend the module path in your environment variables, I think where it is, it's only just for this session. So I think it's safe.
In my case, I have expanded the module path via the .NET call set environment variable, and there you can specify in which scope you put the variables. You can specify machine, you can specify user, or you can specify process. I think so. And in my case, I only put it in the process scope, and so if the process is killed, everything is fine. And this process approach only it's only for sub-processes. The current process and sub-process, if I start another start process, PowerShell or something like this, then the environment variable is propagated,
but it's not changed globally.
And that does what you
isolation, I would call that, and I think that's always a good strategy to use.
Or if you want to write that short, you can do env colon PS module path equals, and then the old one plus the new one. That is a bit quicker, but if you want to do it on .NET, then do it on .NET. That's totally fine. Good. Any other questions?
Everybody else is asleep, I guess.
So good. So I think we are 10 minutes over time, but thank you, Guy, for speaking. Was very much informative. I hope that I get some link of you later that I can post.
Well, not today, probably, but tomorrow.
Perfect. Yeah, and the recording will be, or the part of the recording will be available on the PS World YouTube channel, I think. It is posted. Normally it is posted 1 or 2 days later, and they also will tweet about it. So tweet or Blue Sky or LinkedIn and so on. So if you keep an eye on this, then you can watch the recording if you want. Good. And let's. I have also scheduled someone for next month, so I will announce that after the conf, I think. And thank you. And I will announce it after the conf that we can meet next month. Thank you very much, and bye-bye, and have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.